445 million years ago, Earth was an alien ocean. Its continents were unrecognizable, clustered in the southern hemisphere. Its warm, shallow seas teemed with strange and colossal rulers. But this ancient paradise was about to freeze over. A sudden, catastrophic ice age would soon wipe out 85% of all species. Yet, in the freezing darkness, a revolutionary creature, one of the very first of its kind, would cling to life and inherit the future. This was the late Ordovician period. The planet was a water world. Almost all of complex life lived beneath the waves. The land was empty. It was a silent, barren expanse of rock and microbial crusts. The oceans, however, were a vibrant, thriving metropolis of invertebrates. Vast reefs, built not by corals as we know them, but by stony sponges and intricate moss animals. Trilobites, the armored icons of the ancient seas, scuttled across the seafloor in their millions. They were an ancient dynasty, diversifying into thousands of forms. But they were not at the top of the food chain. Giant orthocones, ancestors of the squid, ruled the water column. They were terrifying hunters, with straight, cone-like shells stretching meters long. Alongside them prowled the eurypterids, the menacing sea scorpions. This was a world dominated by shells, segments, and grasping tentacles. It was an ecosystem of incredible complexity, stable for millions of years. But this stability was intimately tied to the planet's warm, high carbon dioxide atmosphere. And that entire system was about to be shattered by a sudden, violent shift in the Earth's climate. The trigger for this global catastrophe wasn't an asteroid from space. It was an event born from the Earth itself. That honor belonged to the predators. Scientists believe the cause was the rise of a colossal new mountain range. The Proto-Appalachians. As these mountains were violently uplifted, vast new rock was exposed to the air. This fresh, silicate rock began a relentless chemical reaction with the atmosphere. It pulled monumental volumes of carbon dioxide, the planet's warming blanket, straight out of the sky. Temperatures plummeted across the planet. The global thermostat crashed. For the first time in eons, massive ice caps began to form. They grew over the southern supercontinent of Gondwana. And as this ice grew, it drank staggering amounts of water from the planet's oceans. This was the first pulse of the Ordovician-Silurian extinction. It wasn't a flood of fire. It was a draining of the world. Sea levels fell. They didn't just recede, they collapsed. Dropping by as much as 100 meters. The warm, shallow seas, the cradle of life, were exposed to the air. The sprawling invertebrate reefs were left high and dry, dying in the alien sun. The vast, rich habitats that supported the entire ecosystem simply vanished. Trilobites that were adapted to specific water depths and temperatures were stranded. The giant orthocones, the apex predators, found their hunting grounds shrinking into nothing. Life was being suffocated on a planetary scale. This first pulse alone was devastating. It ravaged the species living in the warm, shallow waters. But the catastrophe was not over. The planet remained locked in this icy grip for hundreds of thousands of years. Then, just as abruptly, the climate shifted again. The Ice Age began to wane. The colossal glaciers covering Gondwana started to melt. This was not a rescue. This was the second pulse. A torrent of frigid, fresh water poured back into the ocean basins. Sea levels surged upwards, flooding the recently exposed continental shelves. But this new water was not the same water as before. It was cold. It was dangerously low in oxygen. And it was saturated with nutrients unlocked from the scoured rock. This deluge of nutrients triggered massive planet-choking blooms of algae. When this algae died, it sank to the seafloor and decayed. This process stripped the water column of its remaining dissolved oxygen. The oceans became toxic. Anoxic. Suffocating. Life was trapped. The survivors of the first pulse clinging to life in deeper waters, were now choked by this rising tide of anoxic poison. The warm water species were gone. Now, the cold water species were dying. It was the perfect killing machine, a 1-2 punch that devastated life at every level. The invertebrate dynasty that had ruled the Earth for 50 million years was shattered. 85% of all marine species were annihilated. The seas fell silent, cold, and empty. The world was an empty stage. The great invertebrate dynasties were broken. The apex predators, the orthocones, were gone forever. The seas were cold, toxic, and silent. 85% of all species had been extinguished. But in the murky, anoxic gloom of the post-extinction world, something new was stirring. It was not a giant. It was not a ferocious hunter. It was a humble creature, only a few inches long. It was a fish. But not like any fish we know today. It had no jaw. Its mouth was a simple, muscular opening. It had no fins. Instead, it propelled itself with a simple tail. And its body was covered in a heavy, shell-like armor. Bony plates that acted as a dense, protective shield. This was an Ostracoderm, one of the first vertebrates on Earth. It was part of a new lineage, a radical experiment in biology. And it possessed the precise toolkit needed to endure the crucible. While the great invertebrate empires were complex and specialized, this fish was simple and adaptable. When the first pulse drained the shallow seas, it was not tied to the dying reefs. It sifted through mud and debris, feeding on the microbial mats and algae that survived the collapse. It was a detritivore, a bottom feeder. Its food source was the wreckage of the old world. Then came the second pulse. the flood of cold, anoxic, nutrient-choked water. This toxic tide suffocated the remaining marine life. But this strange, armored fish had a secret weapon. Many scientists believe it had evolved a tolerance for brackish or even fresh water. As the poisonous anoxia flooded the oceans, these early vertebrates could have taken refuge in the river estuaries. This deadly water was, for them, a potential sanctuary. Its survival kit was not aggression. It was resilience. Its armor protected it from the few remaining predators, like the sea scorpions. Its simple diet meant it could live on scraps. And its revolutionary body plan, a flexible internal notochord, the precursor to a spine, allowed it to adapt to new environments in ways the rigid, shell-bound invertebrates never could. The Ordovician extinction was a filter. It punished specialization. It rewarded flexibility. The armored, jawless fish didn't outfight the old rulers. It simply outlived them. The crucible was over. The ice retreated. The oceans stabilized. But the world that life returned to was profoundly empty. The great invertebrate reefs were graveyards. The throne of the apex predator was vacant. This was their chance. The humble, jawless Ostracoderms emerged from their refuges. They found a new world with few competitors. And even fewer predators. They exploded across the new oceans, diversifying with incredible speed. This was the dawn of a new dynasty. The Ordovician extinction was the first great filter for complex life, and the vertebrates had passed the test. These armored pioneers were the new foundation. They were the ancestors. Over the next few million years, in this empty ecological space, a revolutionary adaptation would appear. The jaw. Evolving from the gill arches of these early fish. Into active, powerful hunters. The jaw transformed them from simple bottom feeders. This innovation, born from the survivors of the first great extinction, changed life on Earth forever. The age of invertebrates was over. The Silurian and Devonian periods that followed would be known as the Age of Fish. From these survivors came the Placoderms, the giant armored hunters. From them, the sharks. And from them, the first fish to crawl onto land. Our own distant ancestors. It teaches us that dominance is temporary. The rulers of the world, the Orthocones and trilobites, were wiped away by a climate they could not endure. Survival was claimed not by the strongest, but by the most adaptable. The humble, armored fish that inherited the earth proved that sometimes the greatest catastrophes are also the greatest opportunities. If you would like to join us on our next expedition into Earth's darkest hours in search of the light of life, consider joining our Researchers Guild by subscribing to the channel. And let us know in the comments. Which ancient creature's story of survival do you find the most inspiring?